Yeah. Well, we
There
have
we
we have
go.
12:01, so we can get started. Thank you everyone for calling in today. We're happy to have with us Abby Ferri, who will be presenting on habit forming safety communication. Just very briefly before we introduce Abby, I'd just like to plug our next planned meeting, which will occur in January. We will be hosting representatives from the company JC Broderick, that's an environmental consulting firm, and they'll be discussing with us general asbestos safety awareness. So stay tuned for details on that. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with our organization, just be sure to visit us at our website, li.assp.org. And also be sure to check out our newly revamped LinkedIn page. You can find it by searching ASSP Long Island chapter on LinkedIn. And we'll be sharing interesting and educational content, posting event details, and providing LinkedIn exclusive giveaways as well. So with that, we're going to give it over to Abby Ferri. For those of you who are not familiar with Abby, she is a senior risk control consultant for Gallagher, providing risk management solutions for multiple industries. She's the vice chair of ASSP ISEA Technical Report Committee on the guidance for the fit and selection of personal protective equipment and apparel available for women. She is the past president of the Northwest chapter of ASSP and a past administrator of the Women in Safety and Excellence Common Interest Group of ASSP. She is a frequent conference speaker, podcast host, and guest, and she's authored 2 books, the Habit Safety Book and the Safety Consultant Toolkit, both available on Amazon. So Abby, whenever you're ready, take it away.
I'm ready. Kind of a lot, right? There's kind of a lot going on. So I'm happy to be here speaking with you all, and please do, I've got the chat window open on that screen over there. I've got you guys right here. I've got my materials. So I'll keep an eye out if anyone wants to chat a question, or since I can see some of you on the screen, if you just, show some signs of life and raise your hand or tip your water towards me. Oop. Then I lost Nikki. I was talking about her water bottle. There she is. So feel free, because it's a smaller group, and I want to make this, something that is available or valuable to all of you, even though it is recorded. So that could be awkward. So, whatever you feel comfortable speaking up and asking, please do as I'm presenting, and we'll get started. So I think the meeting initially was advertised as habit forming safety training. And to me, training is communication. Communication can be training. I just talked to a client the other day where they were talking about how tailgate meetings are they training? Are they not training? And we had a discussion about that. So I'm curious on people's thoughts on that. If you just want to put in the chat, training or not training, tailgate meetings in construction, or weekly meetings, that have a canned topic. Is that training? Is that not training? So I like to just put it all under the header of communication. And so that's where we're at here today. And as Matt mentioned, I've written a book, 2 books, but the one that applies to this topic today is called The Safety Habit. And a short quote from that book, it's the habit of safety. It's that elusive common sense that safety professionals chase. We say it doesn't exist, but we can influence its existence in training settings or communication settings. Once this safety habit is built or discovered by a person or by yourself, no one can take it away from you or that person that you've helped to develop that safety habit. So we're going to talk about how this relates to communication, how it relates to worker training, and why you should even care about what a habit is or how habits are formed or broken. Or can they be broken? So habits are having a bit of a moment right now. There's this book, and I take the cover jackets off mine. So this is Atomic Habits, upside down, by James Clear. And so I refer to this a lot. There's another book by James Duhigg, Charles Duhigg, sorry, James Clear, Charles Duhigg. Both have great habit books. There's more out there that are specific to different topics, which is why I wrote The Safety Habit, is to put some safety focused ideas around habit formation. So, and I know during this whole locked down changed times of the past year or so that people have either developed some good habits that they're pretty proud of, or have developed some pretty bad habits that they're now actively trying to break. So that's why habits are really, there's something that's interesting right now. And if you look at the New York Times bestsellers and all those book charts, you'll find the word habit in there multiple times. So the first thing I wanted to introduce to you is this habit loop. And so the habit loop is a concept by Charles Duhigg, and I don't have his book as a prop, but I mentioned it a little bit later, and I'm forgetting the title of his book right now. So I'll mention it later for you when I've got it in the slides. But he brings forth the concept of the habit loop. And so the habit loop has three parts that you can see on the screen. There's the cue, the routine, and the reward. And so to put it simple, a trigger is what tells your brain to go into that autopilot mode and let that behavior, which is the routine, it lets that happen. Then the third piece, the reward, is what helps your brain remember to repeat all of this every time it gets that first cue in the future. So when a behavior becomes automatic because a habit is formed, your brain just goes on autopilot. The decision-making part of the brain, and I'm sure it has a fancy name, which I won't bore you with, that decision-making part of your brain just checks out, which usually that seems pretty great. But in the case of poor habits or habits that we might see in our workforce that are not great or not safety-minded or safety-focused, then this habit loop is horrible when it has created a quote, bad habit for the person or for the worker. So when habits go wrong, that's usually where we're focused on as safety professionals. We talk about common sense. If the people just had common sense, that might mean that there's some bad habits going on in the workforce. So when the three-part brain process builds a bad habit and your brain reinforces it by when they receive that cue, they do their routine, and that reward reinforces the bad thing, your brain likes this bad habit for some reason, because your brain just kind of wants to chill out once in a while. It doesn't want to work super hard and make decisions all the time. So when you have habit loops formed, your brain is happy, but sometimes the outcome is not good. And as safety professionals, often this outcome is really bad because it's translating into injuries, property damage, or other negative consequences that we don't like to see. So even though your brain's working less, this really doesn't work for us. So bad habits often are formed out of stress and boredom. And so I highlight stress because often that's where these bad habits are coming from in the workplace. If you're thinking of a bad habit that you have that's more like in your personal life, it may be that boredom has caused you to form a bad habit. So as I mentioned earlier, bad habits can't necessarily be just broken. They have to be replaced because the brain needs somewhere to go when it receives that cue. So you have to replace that routine and then hopefully get a better reward as that third part of the loop. So how do we replace bad habits? We replace them by going on vacation, which I'm not saying everybody should go on vacation or tell the workers to go on vacation, although vacation is great. It's not exactly that type of vacation, although actual vacation is really good too. So the classic example of going on vacation to replace a bad habit is smoking. So often people have a smoking habit that, you wake up first thing and there's a cue, you woke up. So often that first behavior that happens is grabbing a pack of cigarettes, walking outside and having a smoke. If a person goes on vacation, literally on vacation, you're in a different setting. There's a different place to put your cigarettes. There's a different walk that you do outside. Everything has changed. So it's the opportunity to replace a habit loop. So that's an extreme example. And it's not necessarily something that relates to the workplace, although it kind of can. I've seen people quit smoking in the workplace by changing their physical routines. So we have to think of this vacation mindset and bring it to the workplace. So real actual vacation removes your stress. So think about ways that we can put the brain on vacation in the workplace. So when you do this, it gives your brain space to replace the bad habits. So your brain isn't working as hard. It's kind of almost surprised too. So how can we give workers this vacation-like space for their brain at work to help them replace their bad safety habits? And my simple answer for the purpose of this presentation and for even the book too, is that we have to make our safety training and communication better. And that better is a loaded word here because there's a lot of ways to make it better. Is this going good for people so far? Going good for the dog too. I don't know if you can hear my dog in the background.
Good to go.
Yeah. So the first strategy to putting the brain on vacation is to cut out what isn't relevant for people. Oops. Yeah. Cut out what isn't relevant. So we've all been in safety training where either we do this ourselves or we see it happening. So I've seen that safety professionals talk too much. We just do, especially in a training setting. We give too much background. We give too much foundational information that we think is important because of our ego, because we've gone through education, we've learned all these things. Excuse me. We think we have to impart that. Excuse me. We think we have to impart that. Oh my God, hang on. I think it's the coffee. Okay. So we give too much information, and it might be our ego because, we've learned a lot. We're super smart safety people, and we have to get this information across to people. So then we give all this background, and then we scramble in the last 30 minutes of a class, sometimes an 8-hour class, to give the workers the information they actually need. I don't know what I breathed in this morning. That's like sitting there. Okay. So the point is you have this 8-hour class to give the workers the information they need. And because of your selfish ego, we've given them all this background information that isn't actually valuable for them to do their job. So the essential information that we need to get across, it ends up being rushed at the end of the presentation or the end of the class. And we've all been there, we've all done it. Then we end up trying to get that information across at the end. And then when you're rushing stuff, how do the workers think about that information? They think it's not important, right? Because you're rushing it, it's at the end of the class, and maybe it's not important. And so you're just conveying things all wrong. Like the signals aren't firing how they should be to the person. So that's not good. So if this has happened to you, there's a really good episode of the Safety Justice League podcast where we have Regina McMichael, Tim Page Bodorf, and Linda Tapp, and they give a lot of really interesting strategies about how to provide safety information in an efficient and an engaging way for the worker. So first thing, just stop with that preamble. And I think you all know what I'm talking about. Often at the beginning of like a fall protection class, let's say, we think we have to talk about the OSHA standards. Do we need to talk about the OSHA standards? Is that relevant to the worker? Do they need to know 1926 point, what is it, 500 something? I forgot. Do they need to know that? No, usually they don't. All right, so further to cutting out what isn't surprising, and I surprised you by dang near choking on my own words, so we're getting there.
You're doing great.
Don't do that kind of surprise. I should have tea, not coffee. So I learned this phrase from Derek Sivers, and he's an interesting person. He's a guest on the Tim Ferriss podcast, which is where I first heard him. But he started this company called cdbaby.com. which has nothing to do with any of this, but just if you want to know who's this person I'm quoting, it's this guy, Derek Sivers. And his website is just sivers.org. And I think I have that link in here later on. But he has a blog post where he goes into this topic further about how people only learn when they're surprised. So think about the last time you learned something new. Were you in a place of surprise? So the reason surprise is important is because without surprise, you're not going to change people's minds or give them a new perspective. Without surprise in what you're communicating, it's just more information. So it's just like blah, blah, blah added to their brain, and they'll probably never think of it ever again. So, excuse me. I know one of the things that we aim for in safety training is recall, right? We want people to be able to recall the information when they actually need it in their workplace setting. So if your goal is that someone is like, oh yeah, I remember that from training. Surprise is something that can help with that recall in the future. So you're never going to change minds unless you change people's perspectives. So that's why surprise is a big part of this different type of communication. Often with safety, we're literally trying to change people's minds, right? Because the workers may have a poor attitude towards safety. They may have poor habits, like this whole thing is about. They may be coming to you from a different employer where safety wasn't given the airtime that it should, or that they didn't focus on it or really like internalize it like they should. So this is why surprise is very important. So going back to the habit loop, we've got that cue, the routine, and the reward. So usually the worker's cue is that you're giving them, hang on, I don't want to show you this yet. First, the usual habit loop. So cue, routine, rewards. I just want to make sure you remember that. So usually the cue is that you're talking to them about safety. The routine that their brain goes into in autopilot mode is that they tune out because you never surprise them or never have anything interesting to say or anything that is timely or relevant to them. So then their reward, their brain's reward, is that they get to let their brain wander and think about something else while you're talking. So you think you're getting something across, their brain has gone into this autopilot mode of just think about something else because this safety person is super boring. Unfortunately, that's the typical habit loop. So we need to help the workers, actively help the workers replace this bad habit loop of how they tune you out because you're boring. And we need to give them a better cue. So a better cue is that the worker then is receiving simple, effective communication, and maybe they're surprised or there's a different angle that they're listening to it from. The routine is that they actually tune in when you show up, when you walk by, when the class starts, because you always have something interesting to say. You kind of make their day a little bit. The reward then is that the person takes in new and immediately useful information and maybe with a side of entertainment. So we have to start off, and it's a lot of pressure, I know, but we have to give a better cue. And so that starts with us. How do we give a better cue to the worker? So just a couple quick thoughts on this before I get into some more specific ideas. You can add things like relevancy and timeliness. Time is a huge component of surprising communication for better habit formation. When you're surprising the worker with better cues, it's even more effective if they can immediately use this information. So that's the timeliness aspect of it. If you're talking to the worker about something and they're like, oh yeah, I'm about to do that right now, or we have that project coming up tomorrow, something like that. You're delivering them this just in time or right on time information or other timing that makes sense because of something that is going on in the company or something going on in their department. or in the world, or something that's related to what they've just attended, like a safety training or a toolbox talk or other type of communication that they attended or participated in. So anytime you can build off of something that they're about to do or something that they already did, this is going to just put that stamp in their brain, like this is timely, this is relevant, and surprise, this person usually doesn't communicate to me in this way. Okay, so the cutout what isn't surprising is such a huge tip from me to you that I've put it in here a few times. So again, I think that safety professionals, we add a lot of extra information thinking that it might supplement the message we're giving the worker, when often it's just, again, more blah, 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 and the worker just doesn't use that information. So cut out what isn't surprising. Safety has a lot of surprises. There's a lot of stuff out there, new facts, different methods of getting information to people that, I know, again, I'm asking a lot of you, but I'm sure you're all constantly in search of new information, just little nuggets, not those huge entrees of information, or different methods that you can use to communicate with workers, or new ways of presenting training or other communication. So using, I learned about a new polling program the other day, things like that. So different tools to get your message across. And so when you are consistently in search of these new methods and new ways of doing things, this actually helps you too. And when I talk to other safety professionals, I always want to encourage people to be selfish, which sounds weird, but be selfish in the way that you're making things more fun. So you're making it more fun for yourself. You're making things more engaging for yourself. You're making things more interesting as far as communicating. It's for yourself, but it has a good impact for the worker too. So when you're looking at things this way, it helps you step out of that same old type of mindset. And then you can find surprise and communicate in a more surprising way. And the more you do it, the more it becomes a habit, right? And that's what this is all about. So just be a little selfish. You're putting your brain on vacation when you're looking for new, interesting, surprising information or ways to convey information. So when you put your brain on vacation mode at work, this is passed on to the workers as well when you have those short and frequent communications with them. So another specific tactic, is to anticipate questions. So when approaching a training setting, I'm usually pretty negative or cynical when it comes to developing a training course, especially something that's over an hour or a half day or a full day of training for workers. And I anticipate questions like, why am I here? Why do I have to sit through this again? We just did this, question mark, exclamation point. And so I start to think of those questions that the workers might have and then craft a story to answer their question. So it doesn't have to be like a long and winding story, but it could just be something that is real or based on fact, but somehow gives the worker a story to attach to so that they can answer that question in their head. So you don't even have to wait for those types of questions to come up. You can just begin the training setting of, let me tell you a quick story about why we're here today. And that person's like, oh, I was wondering why the heck I'm here today. And so then you're answering their question proactively with a story. And so the human mind, how we justify things or understand things is that we need stories. So there's a podcast episode, not the one on the screen, but another one. The show is called Hidden Brain. And I forget the episode, but there's something about, it's called storytelling or stories for something. You'll see it when you scroll their feed, something about stories, and go listen to that one. It doesn't immediately look like an episode a safety professional would get anything out of, but it really is. So the human brain is wired for stories. We need to have a story to explain literally everything. So let's say your kid or spouse or whoever you live with comes home and their clothes are a mess. Your brain immediately whether you know it or not, you're immediately putting a story together in your head. Like, oh my God, they got in an accident. I didn't know, they didn't call. Your brain could go a bunch of different directions. So the storytelling is how the brain connects dots and justifies things. And really for safety professionals, it's how the workers get on board with what you're doing. So stories are good. Not too many stories, not too long of stories, not too emotional, and always end on a high note. In safety, sometimes we have to get into like some sad, kind of almost depressing topics, and that's fine. Emotions are good. It's good to, Tim Page Bodorf calls it sweeping the emotions. It's good to bring a bunch of emotion into a training setting, but no matter how low you have to get in the story, please end on a high note. That's a solid piece of advice on storytelling. If you need some more help with understanding how to craft a story or how to build a narrative, you might want to check out this Safety Justice League episode with Tamsin Webster. She is awesome. For one, she helps brands really like tell their story. So she's a strategist, and she has a book called The Red Thread, and I've got the book cover at the end so you can see what that looks like. But she has some really great information about how to go from maybe like a anxiety inducing training setting to something that's just more exciting and goes a little quicker and that the workers get more out of it. So she gave us a lot of really cool strategies in that podcast episode. And she also has you don't have to buy the whole book, but she has an email newsletter that she does. I think it's once a week or maybe once every other week that has there's always something in it that I'm like, oh, that's great. So I would strongly suggest signing up for her email newsletter. And then, okay, Delaney, I see your question about the polling app. And I knew as soon as I said it, people would ask me what it was, and it'll come to me. I think it's Menti, MENTI. So menti.com. And I've seen presenters actually do a whole presentation through that app. So people can text a short code to a phone number, and then the presentation comes up. So if I was doing that for this, you guys could be watching this presentation on your phone and doing like little hearts and things. You can like double click and send me hearts throughout the whole presentation. I could incorporate polls through that too. So it's kind of a cool way to do a presentation if you don't have a big screen or little screens, like you're all at your screens. If it's workers just kind of sitting there at their chairs or standing there in front of you, it's a good way to bring just like a multimedia kind of thing to the presentation. And everybody has a cell phone, right? I mean, pretty much when we're out on job sites and workplaces, everyone has their phone, unless it's one of those environments where you can't have phones, for safety purposes, but usually you can rely on cell phones. And so that could be a nice way to just bring something different into the presentation. So then, I don't know about you, I'm the type of student that wants to get some extra credit. So I want to give you all opportunity for extra credit on this habit forming safety training quest. So this might get a little weird, but stay with me. You can add love. I'm not saying like hug everybody, but if you're a hugger, fine, they expect that of you. But we can add love by adding more of a human element to safety training and safety communication. And you have to do it in your own personal way. Like when I worked in construction, I would tell the workers, I actually care about you. And we'd laugh, but they were like, that's cool you said that, because I get what you mean. And I actually care about you too. So, we can communicate care, we can communicate love, in a workplace setting, and especially within safety, it really just, goes hand in hand. Another extra credit here is to add, let me go back to love. Hang on. The reason I even said that is because there's a friend and safety professional of mine. His name is Matt Stinchfield, and he works for the Brewers Association. He's their safety ambassador. And if you go to the Brewers Association website, they have like an article feature on Matt, and he actually talks about how safety is love, and he gets into a whole thing about it, and it's pretty interesting. So I tease him about it, but it really made me think. It was one of those things where he communicated something in a surprising way, and I'll never forget it. So that's like a meta lesson in this whole thing. So then the next thing here for extra credit is adding creativity. And I don't know what that means, for your workplace or for you personally. So again, a lot of this stuff is very personal in what you feel comfortable with, but also in what your organization will support and understand. So when I say language, it's not like English, Spanish, Polish, whatever, but in your workplace, people have a language. They have a way that they like to be communicated to. They have certain cultural aspects that people all, laugh at or find joy in. And so if you can kind of communicate adjacent to those cultural factors, and with creativity, then that's going to go a long way and people are going to listen. I've seen companies or safety departments come up with slogans. And I know some people hate like jargon or slogans, but safety is about communication. It's about recalling what the lessons are. And it's about community also. If people are talking about building a safety culture, you can't have culture without a community of people to actually live out that culture. So there's another interesting book to read. It's called, oh my gosh, it's called Sapiens. And it's written by Noah something. I forgot his last name. I should really add this to the presentation too, but the book is called Sapiens. It's huge. It's a really thick book. And it's something that my husband started reading, actually. I think he's finished it. I have not. I just kind of pick it up and take little bits and pieces from it. But it talks a lot about how many people one leader can influence. It talks a lot about culture and community. So a culture can exist independent of people, right? There's cultures that are ancient and that there's none of those people left anymore, but we still know about what that culture is. We can study it. There's artifacts, there's stories that have been passed down. The community is the actual people in the moment that are living out that culture, that are able to show us like, oh, I see that community, I see what they're doing, that's this type of culture. We can see that. So a community could be, and I always relate it to construction, but you can relate it to manufacturing or anywhere that you have like small groups of people. A community could even be just a team, a work crew, or it could be a combination of multiple crews at one site. So how a community, however the communities are broken down in your workplace, a community expresses the company culture in their own way. So I've worked for companies where they say, safety first, but then how is the community actually playing out that culture when you go and look at them, go observe the work site each day. It may be good, it may be bad, but go and observe those communities that you have within your workplace to understand more about your company's culture. So all that to say is just to respect the culture that you have at your organization and how you add creativity or add love or other new surprising ways of communicating safety. You may even have like a statement or a mascot related to safety. I have worked with the Danger Rangers and now the Danger Dodgers. These are two different completely organic names that a safety committee and a safety team came up with. Coincidentally, both are in the service industry. The Danger Rangers are at a local brewery here, and the Danger Dodgers are the safety team from a quick serve chain of restaurants that I work with. So great, I heard them say that in a meeting and I was like, what, is that a thing? That's what you're calling yourself now? Okay, that's awesome. I love that kind of stuff. It probably wouldn't have gone over well if I said, we're the Danger Rangers now. It has to come from the community, expressing the culture of the organization. And at these two places, the culture supports extreme creativity. I mean, they came up with a name, they did the t-shirts, they have a mascot, it's a whole thing. So anytime that you see that kind of creativity expressed by the workers themselves, I love that stuff. So basically just anything sticky, like I said, that works with your organization's culture, go with it or kind of encourage it on your own. I put this image here of Nate Hook from a Safety Justice League episode where we interviewed him. He works for it's a group of rental communities for college students. And so he works on communicating safety and other like community information to these groups. And he uses poetry, art, rap, other music. And so I suggest this episode because it's an extreme form of edutainment. But I do think that there's little lessons that each of us could learn to just kind of pepper in some more creativity in our own way, based on what Nay does in his day-to-day work. But he's ridiculously creative and even on the spot creative. And I'm not expecting all of you to go out and like make a new safety rap that connects with your workers, because that may not be organic, you know, for Leo or for me to come up with a safety rap. And that's okay. All right, so then after training or after your communication, what happens outside of a training classroom or a prescribed training setting is key. So I look for, and I encourage you to look for quick opportunities. And I call this, well, I'm borrowing the HIIT, which is high impact interval training. Sometimes there's a CrossFitter in these groups. I am not one. I actually did do an intervals class on my bike this morning. So, hey, you know, I fit in with this today, but most days, no, I do not do high intensity interval training, but I do it in my safety communication. So again, like I mentioned, ending on a high note. So if your high intensity interval training or communication opportunity with a worker is about something post-incident, you may go to a dark place, you know, you may talk about something depressing, you know, they broke something or they got hurt, or worse happened in your workplace. So you discuss it, but end on a high note. And in safety, often that means here's what we're going to do next time, or here's what we learned from that situation. So end on a high note can mean multiple things, not just like a joke, you know, like the Seinfeld end on a high note. If you remember that episode, it's not just about ending on a joke. I'm not expecting you to be comedians, but just bring the emotions back up, not keep them down and sad about something. When you do interact with workers, sometimes it's like real quick. We're walking by on our way to something, or we find ourselves, you know, in the hallway with an extra 5 minutes before or after a meeting. So don't waste that interaction time. But on the flip side, not every interaction with a worker has to be an intense safety message. So sometimes we just need to do some relationship building. So that interaction time, that high intensity interval training interaction time might just be, hey, I saw the Astros lost. How you doing? You know, something like that. So that you know something personal, it's brief, and you're just building that relationship with that person. So while I do think it's important to not waste time that we get with the workers, because we often don't get a lot of time with them, especially face-to-face, one-on-one, or, you know, one to a small group, I still think that you need to read the situation, like read that room, wherever that is, and use that time for what's needed. Do you need to reinforce a safety message? Great, you know, take the time to do it in a couple minutes. Do you need to build the relationship? Cool, you know, do that with that person. There's nothing worse than being disconnected and doing one of these high intensity interval moments with a worker that you need a relationship with first. So you get into a safety message, you know, hey, Bob, we talked about this fall protection stuff, blah, blah, blah. But if Bob has been having a hard time trusting you, this may not go over well. So it's a lot of like very quick reads of interpersonal communication and what's needed in the moment. So again, it's a lot, but we can do it because we're safety people and we do crazy stuff every day. The next piece here, outside of the training setting, whatever that setting was, again, is to create opportunities for the people to demonstrate what they learned. And If any of you have studied the adult learning principles, you know that adults need to be recognized for what they already know. So if they already know something, or if they just learned something, you want to give them those opportunities to show you, hey, I know this. You know, it's either I know this already, or I just learned this and look what I can do. So give them those opportunities to demonstrate what they know, whether it's respecting their knowledge of what they bring to the table, or giving them the opportunity to show you something new that they've learned. They need to practice what's new. So I've been trained on how to operate a forklift, but I never get to operate a forklift. So if I was in a workplace where they expected me to operate the forklift at some point, they would need to give me opportunities to practice those skills that I just learned. So if you're giving people training or communication for something that's going to not come up very often in their day-to-day, you still need to find those opportunities for them to tell you what they know and show you what they know. So then there's two concepts here on the slides. The first one here is the protege effect. And I don't know if anyone's heard about this, or maybe once I describe it, you'll say, oh, that's what it's called. This is where you give workers the opportunity to teach others. And not because I'm lazy, but I do this a lot in my training classes, where I have the workers teach each other, or whether it's something that someone already knows, or something that we all learn together, and then we break off into small groups and then teach each other. Because when someone has the opportunity to teach or influence other people, it just like solidifies what they just learned or what they already know. So protege effect means that the worker is creating these proteges of theirs by teaching them what they know or what they just learned. And then it's a double impact, because then that worker, it further solidifies what they know. Basically, when you teach something, you learn it better. Is that good grammar? I don't know. When you have the opportunity to teach, it really just, again, solidifies, I'm saying the same word again, but it really solidifies that knowledge. And then habit stacking is something that maybe a lot of us do with our personal habits, well-being habits that we want to get better at. For example, I wasn't doing a lot of stretching. So now I make sure that any exercise thing I ever do, I do some stretching with it. There was a time when I was trying to learn Spanish. And so I would take the time I was already fulfilling my habit of coffee each morning. So while the coffee was making, I would bust out the Duolingo app and do a couple Spanish lessons. So the habit that's already there, and then adding a new habit to go with that to make that second thing a habit. My habit is coffee drinking, still is. So if there's something that I want to bring into my life, I often stack it with that coffee drinking habit. So the Spanish kind of went by the wayside. It happens. But for a time, I mean, I was doing, I'll share with you guys, now it's going to be memorialized in the recording. But so I would be making my coffee, but then also doing squats and lunges because I wanted to get some activity going first thing in the morning. And then when I was trying to learn Spanish better, I would have the Duolingo app going. So I'd start my coffee, and literally as I was doing squats and lunges, I was doing the Duolingo app. So that is habit stacking at maybe not its finest, but that's how you can see how you can start adding things and bringing them into your habits that are already developed. Just make them good ones. All right, so now what? So throughout this, I've given you just the tip that I think you need to make all of this your own. So sure, all these tips are awesome. Recognizing the habit loop, communicating for surprise, lending some creativity to the training and communication settings, communicating with love, communicating with surprise, like I mentioned. So all of these things, you have to make it personal so it comes across genuine. No one can do what you do, how you do it, and the workers know that. They know you. So make sure that as you incorporate any new things, that it is, it's personal. It's your personal touches on these things. Now that said, there's a ton of great resources out there, and just a few, the podcast episodes that I mentioned, hopefully you take a listen to some of those. Books, I mentioned obviously mine, which is short, super short, so quick. And then Atomic Habits, which is, it's a little longer, but there's a lot of resources towards the back. So it's not as long of a book as it looks like. And then also, if you do read, or even if you don't read the James Clear book, go to his website and sign up for his emails, because he emails out all of the guides that go along with his book weekly. So I just have a folder of like all James Clear stuff. And if I need some kind of habit worksheet or something for my daughter, even on the personal side of things, I just go to that folder, and James Clear has something for every occasion. The book I couldn't think of earlier from Charles Duhigg is The Power of Habit. And that is, I mean, both of these habit books were really started as business. So habits, but make it business. But they both authors realized they had to add the life aspect to it. So again, it's more so for habits and why they make things work in the business setting. But if you're an intuitive reader, you'll pick up how you can use these things in your personal life. And then the last one there is Tamsin Webster's book, Find Your Red Thread, Make Your Big Ideas Irresistible. So I didn't want to give it away, but Tamsin talks about communicating your big idea. So in order to do that, you'd have to know what is your big idea. And for safety, sometimes it's either the big policy that you're trying to roll out, or maybe just the general big idea of we need people to work safely. So you can look at it a couple different ways. It can be a hyper specific thing that you need to communicate, or it could just be the overall concept of communicating safety to the workers. And then the icon on top is Safety Fundamentals, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, is run by Linda Tapp. And so she has a newsletter that there is a subscription fee, but it's very worth it, especially if you're doing a lot of training. She sends out just ridiculously helpful guides on how to communicate with surprise by coming up with games that you can add to your training scenarios, by coming up with ways that you can do training without any words on a screen. So imagine that surprise to your workers if you show up and you're not using words, you're using pictures and photos and infographics, which I guess have words, so that wouldn't really count, and games, having them play games to learn safety concepts. So she has some great stuff. All these resources are meant to help you just further find how you prefer to communicate, or what your personality is as far as creativity, and then just build on that to make things just more exciting and engaging for you, and in turn making it exciting and engaging for the workers too. Okay, we got to the end. I made it. So if you want to find more information about me, abbyferri.com, and then I'm at Safety Abby on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Abby Ferri on Twitter, and then the Safety Justice League podcast and our related universe things is at safetyjusticeleague.net. So that's where you can find all the stuff I'm up to. I try to share as much as possible about what I'm learning and you know, what resources I'm finding useful. So LinkedIn is probably the best place for that sort of thing. And yes, I'm seeing comments. Okay, I'm gonna put these in front of my face now. So yes, Linda's games are amazing. And yes, I'm in WISE, and WISE shares a lot of stuff in our WISE universe of the ASSP community, and also the WISE Facebook group and LinkedIn group. There's always a lot of interesting strategies and methods being shared in there too. Habit stacking, yes, Delaney, that's probably my favorite thing to do. I'm always trying to stack like something new. Reading is one. So I didn't mention like negative habit stacking. So if you have a negative habit and you want to replace it, like for me, it's cell phone stuff. Like if I'm going to sit down and relax in my chair back there, because I'm in my house and that's my living room back there. So if I'm going to go sit on the couch and relax, I often bring my phone and I start scrolling and looking at my phone. Well, if I'm trying to finish that Sapiens book or any other of the 12 books I have checked out of the library at any given time, I'm never going to read them if I have a phone in my hand. So I try to put books This is so silly. I try to put books throughout the house in places where I would usually be looking at my phone, so that it's like the books are there, they're calling to me, use that instead of the phone. So it's kind of stacking, kind of not. It's kind of a visual replacement. So use that how you will. You can stage food in different places of your house if you're trying to have better nutrition habits. Wherever you usually grab your secret stash of chocolate, put something healthy there. Let's see. And Sapiens is I was right. Noah is the middle name. The rest of the guy's name is right there. So you have to really be clocked in and ready to read a book if you want to get into that book, but it has just really amazing insights for the human ability to influence and communicate to people. And then yes, that Mentimeter, I don't know. That's the website where you can build presentations and have polling built right into it. And actually the presentation I was at yesterday, the speaker had like the word clouds going up there and everything in real time. It was really cool. So I would suggest using that. It probably costs money to do all those features, but often it's worth it to do those things. Otherwise, the other polling apps I've seen used are Poll Everywhere and Kahoot, of course. Everyone loves Kahoot, kids and adults alike. People love trivia, so that can still be fun too in a habit-forming training and communication setting. What else, you all? Do you have any other, let's see, is there a generally, thank you, Mr. Harris, is there a generally established time frame that it takes to break a bad habit or build a new one? Nope. There isn't. I know a lot of us have probably read that you can build a habit in 30 days, or is it 90 days? Who knows, right? Because there's a bunch of different resources out there that contradict themselves on how long it takes to build a habit. So if you use some of the more high intensity habit formation tactics like the protege effect or habit stacking, then you can build a habit pretty quick. I potty trained my daughter in a weekend. So, there's it involved a lot of M&Ms and me sleeping on the floor. So, but if you're going to commit and you're going to add some wild aspects to something, you can build a habit quick. And also, motivation is a big part of it too. So with safety in the workplace, often it's not so much communication, it's motivation. And sometimes, what is it? The 80-20 rule, right? Like most of the people are motivated by being healthy and safe, but other folks do not have that motivation, and they might be negatively motivated, that they need to know what are the bad things that can happen. So sometimes it's not so much being creative and communicating the information, but being creative and building some kind of motivation system that works for your workplace or works for the culture of the organization.
All right, Abby, well, thank you so much for that. I know I have a long list of books and podcasts that I now have to check out. So,
Awesome.
Yeah, we appreciate you joining us. I do understand you have to log off promptly. We do have, a couple minutes more of your time. So if anyone else has any questions, yeah, just encourage anybody to type into the chat, unmute.
No question here. I just wanted to thank Abby. That was excellent. And I'm going to have to start doing some of that habit stacking, the squats and coffee, little podcasts here and there. I can get into that. So thank you for sharing.
That's awesome. You could do squats and listen to the podcasts about doing this stuff better. There you go.
There we go. Mm-hmm.
That teeth brushing time is critical too. So I've built some habits of doing some standing stretches or exercises while brushing teeth. And then that sets you up, kind of, gives you that motivation for later in the day to keep moving. So just find those little things. If there's a place that you go to frequently in the office, maybe that's a place where you can add some kind of new positive habit. If often there's a worker that's difficult to communicate with, maybe you could stack something positive with it, that you go and get your favorite coffee from the vending machine, and then you have to talk to that person you don't usually like to talk to, but you're bringing in like a positive and trying to build a positive habit out of something that's usually looked at as negative by you. It's tough. Brains are weird.
All right, well, Abby, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thanks everybody.
Abby. Thanks,
Have a good rest
Matt.
of your day.
Matt, great job again as usual. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And thanks, Matt, for collaborating with the New York City chapter. We appreciate you.
Thanks for everyone calling in.
Of course. Have a good
I
one.
love the wrap.
Oh, thanks, Leo.
You made me think of it.
That's awesome. Thank you.